Welcome to the Domain Name Wire podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Alleman, and this is episode number 556. On today's show, we are going to talk about reseller registrars. I've invited Robbie Birkner, the CEO of North America for the new domain reseller platform OpusDNS, to talk about why companies choose to use a reseller platform, how reseller platforms have evolved over the years, and why he thinks the market is ready for a new competitor in this space. Well, a typical customer for a platform like OpusDNS is a hosting company, a marketing agency, or law firm. A lot of domain investors also use reseller platforms, and we'll talk about why. Stay tuned for that conversation in just a few minutes. But first, a word from our sponsor. Our sponsor this week is Salve.com and its for sale pages. There are quite a few companies that offer for sale landing pages, but Salve.com does it at just a 4% commission. It also makes it easy to list your domain names as well as transfer domains. In fact, if they're registered at Salve, they transfer instantly. Salve also offers super fast payouts. In fact, if you sell a lot of domains with Salve, they even offer instant payouts. Learn more and start selling your domains through Salve Landers. Go to salve.com/DNW/sell. That's sav.com/DNW/sell. Let's talk about news in the domain business from the past week. The International Trademark Association, known as INTA, has filed an amicus brief asking the Supreme Court to settle a long-running circuit split regarding the Anti-Cybersquatting Consumer Protection Act, or ACPA. The split has to do with when a domain was registered. The Ninth Circuit on the West Coast says that regardless of when the current registrant took control of a domain name, as long as the original registrant date preceded a trademark holder's rights in a mark, then the trademark holder has no claim. Other circuits look at when the current registrant took control of the name. This is similar to UDRP, in which the panel looks at the date the current registrant took control of the domain name. INTA obviously wants the latter to be applied as it's more favorable to trademark holders. INTA filed its brief in response to an appeal by a company that wants the domain trx.com. That case itself is a bit of a stinker, though, and the odds of the Supreme Court taking this up, I believe, are rather small. However, if the Supreme Court does take it up, perhaps it could also get rid of a legal theory posited by some plaintiffs' attorneys. These attorneys suggest that a domain renewal is a re-registration, so a fresh registration, and should reset the clock. In fact, last week, a boot company called Freebird Life filed an in-rim lawsuit against Freebird.com. This is a valuable domain registered in 133 extensions, and lots of companies use the name. But in the boot company's favor, it submitted screenshots of parked domain ads on Freebird.com for boots. The plaintiff in this case is making that re-registration argument that I just talked about. In other legal news, the Italian organization that manages the Prosecco name has filed a lawsuit against the owner of Prosecco.com and ProseccoDOC.com. It filed that lawsuit in the United Kingdom, although the person it filed the suit against says he was the former owner of the domain. The current owner in the U.S. filed a U.S. lawsuit asking for a declaratory judgment to try to stop any transfer order that might be issued in the U.K. case. Last week, actor and rapper Common emceed the .org Impact Awards in Washington, D.C. Public Interest Registry, the group that manages .org domains, awarded $180,000 to organizations that use .org names. The top winner was the Fund for Congolese Women, which works to empower women within the Democratic Republic of Congo by advancing initiatives to eliminate gender-based sexual violence, provide empowerment programs for women and girls, educate women about HIV and AIDS and reproductive health, and advocate for environmental justice and equitable access to resources and land. Boy, that's a big remit right there. It took home a $50,000 prize. This is the 7th year of the .org Impact Awards, and PIR has donated $865,000 over that time. Before we get to the interview segment, just want to mention a few upcoming domain industry events. First up, Domain Days takes place in Dubai, October 22 to 23rd. I've heard great things about this event, so if you're in the area or can fly out there, I definitely think it's worth attending. Unfortunately, I won't be able to make it. I also won't be able to make it to the ICANN meeting that takes place in Dublin. That event is October 25th through 30th. This event was originally scheduled for Oman, but was moved due to worries about conflict in the Middle East after airspace was briefly closed earlier this year. And finally, NamesCon takes place November 4th through 6th in Miami. This is the first year the event will take place in Miami. It's also the first year that the conference is under new ownership. I'll be at NamesCon, and on Wednesday morning, November 5th, also happens to be my birthday, I'm hosting a discussion with domain investors Michael Mann, Josh Reason, and Braden Pollock. You'll hear about how they acquire domains, how they price them, and what they're doing to sell them. Should be a great discussion, and I hope you'll attend. One other quick thing before we chat with Robbie, I'd appreciate you leaving a review about this podcast in your podcast app. This helps me grow the audience and get new listeners. There's more news at domainnamewire.com, but now let's chat with Robbie Birkner. My guest this week is Robbie Birkner. He is the CEO North America for OpusDNS. Robbie, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Andrew.
I'd like to start by talking about your background in the domain business. I know you've had a history with reseller registrars, but tell me how you got into the business and your story.
Yeah, now I'm going to out how old I am because I've been in the industry for close to 25, 26 years. I actually wrote my thesis at Key Systems, and then I took on a job at Key Systems, built together with the founders, we built the RP proxy as a reseller product, and that's how we started at Key Systems. And then, fast forward 2006, I wanted to see if the grass is greener elsewhere. Took on a position of a domain people, one of the first ICANN accredited registrars that at that time would belong to Hostway. I did that for 2 years, was a little bit too corporate for me. So then I joined ME. I tested the waters of being involved with the registry, consulted with
This is Montenegros.me.
Yeah, exactly. That was the joint venture at that time between Affiliates, GoDaddy, and Montenegro. Great people there, loved the TLD, had a great time with them. And then, at that time, the founders of Key Systems had separated, and Jens reached out to me and said, "Hey, Robbie, we work really well together. Would you be interested in creating HexNet North America?" Right? So I jumped on the opportunity, brought Tony Kim on board, who's now COO of .music. And we ran and operated HexNet, also a reseller platform, but a little bit different than the RP proxy. It was multi-level. So I could add you as a reseller, you could add a sub-reseller, and so forth, right? So selling different types of products. Did that close to 10 years. In 2019, we sold the business to Centrelink. Took some time off and then got sucked right back into the business. Ben approached me and asked me if I was interested in heading up the reseller division. I said, sure, it sounds good. And I did that for 3 years.
Ben Crawford, the then CEO of Centrelink, which is now, for people listening, is now called Team Internet Group. Yeah,
exactly. And then so I was the head of the reseller division. And then I was promoted to the head of the online presence division. And then I left at the end of March in 2023 to take some time off from the domain business. And then at the end of 23, Hakan Ali, who was the former CEO of InternetX, one of our major competitors at Key Systems, he reached out and said, "Hey, Robbie, would you be interested in creating a new B2B wholesale registrar?" Right? So my first reaction was like more or less to hang up on him and say, I'm done with the domain business.
I've done this enough, yeah.
But, because I had the utmost respect for Hakan, we explored it. I did some research in the market. We looked at the offerings in the market. And, I've always respected Hakan. He was always a fierce competitor online, and we became friends offline. And I said, you know what, with his knowledge, his experience, I think there's a lot of products, things that we could do in the wholesale space that we never got around to doing. So we said, you know what, the timing is right now. So let's do this. That's how we got to creating OpusDNS.
So I want to dig in a little bit more into that, because I look at this industry and it seems very mature. And there are lots of players in the space, including ones that you've been involved with before. You have the Enum Open SRS, which is combined many years ago and is probably the most dominant. Are they the biggest reseller? Yes. And then you've got you know,
so yes.
what Team Internet has now. You have, I mean, they're just the Newfold Digital, of course, has what it acquired from Direct Eye. So there are a lot of players in the space. It's probably not the highest margin business in the world. What did you see looking at the space that you thought, hey, there's an opportunity for OpusDNS to step in here?
That's a great question, Andrew, and hopefully it doesn't come back to bite me. We look at the space, we have, and not to be disrespectful to any of our competitors, but we look at this as a multi-tier approach. You've got, as you mentioned, OpenSRS, been around for ages, highly respected. You've got Team Internet with their reseller platforms. You've got InternetX, also highly respected. And then you've got your open provider, your RTR, and your logic boxes. And outside of that, there's still other wholesale registrars, but these I consider the most dominant ones. And a lot of these players have been around for many, many years. We believe, having operated registrars, that the technical debt in many of these registrars is very high. A lot of their engineering resources are spent on maintaining legacy code. And, having a fresh approach to this, looking at this differently, trying to push the bar, leveraging the knowledge that Hakan brings from his time at Cedo and his involvement at Cedo, not just domains wholesale. Where can we go with the aftermarket? Where can we go with other products that are currently not existent? Taking a fresh perspective on APIs. How do we present APIs? How do we do the documentation? How do we look at the dashboard? How do we make it easier, more intuitive? The technology has advanced so much nowadays that, you can pull up a dashboard relatively quickly, but just also bringing in the right people to fine tune it, to make the usability top notch. That's basically where we are right now. That's how we see it.
So tell me, though, I imagine there's also inertia in the space, and the switching costs aren't nominal. Like it's easy for me to move my domains from one registrar to another, but if I'm using a reseller platform, I imagine it takes a bit of work to say, okay, we're going to move over to another reseller platform.
Yeah, you've nailed it once again. Switching platforms is not easy. The cost is evident logically, right? So our goal is, when we look at the wholesale space, we look at, and especially when we look at domains, you've got three types of revenue streams. You've got new registrations, you've got the renewals. The renewals, if you're doing your job fairly well, the renewal should be relatively easy. And then you've got transfers. And then, when you're talking in a wholesale space, talking to big hosting companies, other competitive registrars that want to use your backend services, it does come down to the migration. So we will be putting a lot of emphasis on migration support, migration services. We are developing an AI concierge service that will ideally make it easier to transfer, take all that heavy load off the customer's plate. There will still be some involvement, but take the heavy lifting off their plates. So it does become a competitive advantage for us, and the cost of moving is not as high for the incoming customer.
Sure. And I assume there are actually, let me look a little bit broader here. Like, who are customers that use reseller registrars, right? You mentioned hosting companies, but talk to me about who might want to consider using, let's just say, OpusDNS.
We took a step back, with our pricing model that we have currently 4 pricing tiers that we're supporting. We looked at it and we basically broke it down into customer personas. So we have our typical SMBs, small portfolios, domainers starting off in the business. They would start off with our basic plan, just to dabble a little bit in domains, nothing big. Then we have the next plan would be for startups, freelancers, customers who manage smaller portfolios for their customers. And that could be marketing agencies, that could be lawyers, that could be anything that, smaller portfolios between, I would probably say 500 and 1.5, 2,000 domains. And then we have our premium plans, more or less for web developers, designers, that are looking for more tools around how they manage their domains, how they manage the DNS. And then, of course, we have our enterprise large resellers, where you're talking 50,000 plus, ideally up into the 500,000 or millions. And that's where our product, what we're calling AMPS, Accreditation Management Service, will also play a role, where we can take your accreditation and plug it into our backend. So you connect to our backend by an API, You can resell for us, large volumes. And there's always a break even where a customer will say, well, maybe I should go directly because then I have a relationship with the registry. I can negotiate whatever marketing plans, MDFs I want, but I want to leverage your backend OpusDNS to manage my accreditation. So we will be coming up with a product called Accreditation Management Service.
Okay. I want to ask some follow-ups on some of those. So you mentioned like a law firm or a marketing agency managing their client domains. Why would they want to use a reseller platform as opposed to just managing those domains at a registrar, just at a non-reseller registrar?
I think typically the retail registrars are targeting retail customers that have maybe like an Andrew Element that has maybe, I don't know how many domains you own, but
a few thousand,
a few thousand, right? So it's only one single customer, right? And if you're looking for the infrastructure to add customers, logically assign domains to them, do bulk management services around how you update them, I think that's where the reseller play really comes into play, and especially also with the wholesale pricing and the discounts based on volume.
And you mentioned domain investors as well, which some people might be like, wait, I'd use a reseller registrar, but I was a customer of Hexanet. I know lots of other people who were, and I'm not a the Why would a domain investor want to use a reseller registrar like OpusDNS?
So number one is wholesale pricing naturally. So the more domains you have in your portfolio, the better pricing you can get, the bulk functionality. You will see us tapping into various different aftermarkets in the near future. So the ease of being able to list your portfolio on multiple aftermarkets at the same time, all within a single dashboard, will be to your benefit as a domainer.
But when I think about pricing and kind of looking at yours, so first of all, and correct me if I'm wrong, but your pricing allows you to pay a subscription fee to get into the lower pricing tiers. You don't necessarily have to have X amount of domains. Is that right?
Right. Correct. The subscription tiers are broken down into various features that we believe the various different customer personas might need. So there is, the basic plan, very basic features. And the higher up the more you upgrade, the more features will be released to you.
Give me an example of what a feature would be that you get in the higher tiers.
Oh, now you're putting me on the spot. For example, AMP's Accreditation Management Service doesn't really make sense for somebody that has a low volume of domains, right? It would only make sense. And we would try to convince somebody there's no point in doing AMPs because the headache of managing your accreditation is way too great. If you're in the enterprise, it would make sense to release that feature to that customer because an enterprise customer, you would assume that they have a high volume of domains where it becomes more important for them to possibly go directly.
Got it. Okay. And you guys do on your pricing page at opusdns.com/pricing. You've got a comparison of all these plans, but I think about it from the domain investor perspective. And right now, a lot of registrars are basically doing at cost pricing for domain investors now. Obviously, you've got like your premium plan, there's a 15% markup, and you're getting a lot more, right? You're getting this reseller infrastructure where you can have customers underneath you and that sort of thing. But I think domain investors don't necessarily need that, right?
That is correct. But domain investors also want to be able to pick up the phone, talk to a human being. We're not just looking at resellers as resellers. We're looking at them as partners and even domainers. I remember back at Hexanet, one of our most friendly customers was Michael Birkins. He was a perfect customer. He was happy to pay a little bit more. The big thing for him was I can pick up the phone and talk to a human being and actually know somebody or somebody that understands my business.
And then I assume that some domain investors also would look at kind of enterprise options with y'all, right? Which are, if they have a larger portfolio, and then the markups would be even lower in those cases, or getting their own accreditations and managing that through you, right?
Absolutely. And everything starts with a conversation, Andrew.
Right.
So our goal is pick up the phone, talk to us. Let's hear you out.
So speaking of conversations, you guys have been having them for a long time because I remember you guys sponsored NamesCon last year. You were obviously at a number of conferences since then. So I'm curious, you've started registrars before. You've been working on OpusDNS for a long time. What were some of the things that maybe surprised you, maybe took longer? What would you say about setting up a registrar in this day and age?
So number one, it really comes down to the team, Hakan and I, we're very selective of who we want to onboard. We've got an amazing team, a team that we're super proud of. Finding the right individuals that have the experience, that are not stuck in the past, that have the experience from the past, but are open to new technologies. Where is the industry heading? What have we done in the past? What worked in the past? Does it work today? Do we have to rethink it today? I think, and we have that team. We've put that team together. We've got some amazing individuals across a vast variety of experience. Challenging ourselves to really think outside the box, I think that was the biggest obstacle. Secondly, I would say it's not easy. It's not easy building a registrar nowadays, especially with all the compliance that you have to abide by. A lot of legislation coming down in Europe, in the European Union, taking that into consideration. It's not easy. And then building it to scale, be it in cloud or on-prem, a blend of both, having the costs in mind. It is not easy. But the biggest obstacle for us was probably finding the right team members.
You've talked about Hakan, but I mean, you've brought on a lot of other people. Just you don't have to name them all, but who are a few of the people? And then, of course, someone's going to be left off here. So
no, it's like if I do leave somebody off, of course, forgive me. It was appealing to me to do something with Hakan because I have the utmost respect for him and his knowledge. And then, with Hakan also came Thomas Mertz, who was the CEO of Internet X together with Hakan. So ton of knowledge, ton of experience, ton of really big network. We're very fortunate to have Marco Hoffman join. He was the former head of domains at Internet X. Also somebody, ton of experience, great contacts in the industry, good understanding of dealing with customers, understanding customer needs that can flow into features, elements in the dashboard. We were fortunate to have Sven Ropos, that was the former CTO at Hexanet, apply. He joined, so somebody who also has wholesale experience, especially with the AMPS product, was important to us. And then, we had several individuals from Automatic join us. So having the retail experience, absolutely amazing.
Automatic being the WordPress.com.
Exactly.
Behind WordPress, yeah.
And then, so having those individuals join us in different locations around the world, extremely valuable to us. We're building products for retail registrars, right? There are some of our persona groups. So having somebody who understands the retail space, what are the features, what are the products they need, what are some of the obstacles they encountered when reselling themselves, is extremely beneficial for us. So we have a diverse group of people, some on the East Coast, Iceland, Brazil. We've got several employees in New Zealand, but the bulk of our employees are in Regensburg in Germany.
Okay. And are you guys still hiring?
Absolutely. We're constantly looking for additional individuals that bring something to the table, that are forward-thinking, forward-looking, and who are not shy to roll up their sleeves.
So I see at opusdns.com/careers, there are some openings here, digital marketing manager, junior backend developer, et cetera. So I guess people can look there. But I assume if anyone is interested in what you're doing and they have a background that might be compelling, they should reach out.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. So you mentioned compliance a little while ago, and I've got to imagine this is, I read about these things, right? NIST in Europe and all these sorts of things. So is that one of the key benefits to using a reseller platform, is that piece is kind of baked into the platform?
Yes, absolutely. Without a doubt. It's, there's one thing just to use the reseller platform. Absolutely. We need to remain in compliance, especially when we're looking at different accreditations. Like, at AU, you need to do registrant verification. So you need to tap into a verification agent. So automating all of that is extremely difficult. Scaling it is even more difficult. So going with a reseller-based business takes all those headaches away from you, because we need to remain in compliance anyway, right?
Mm-hmm. Got it. So I recently had Name.com on the show because they had launched a new API that they're saying, this is great for AI, vibe coding tools and that sort of thing. So they kind of, I guess, have a reseller platform around that. I assume that for a lot of your customers, will they be using an API to access your services?
So typically when it comes to the wholesale business, you're looking at the 80-20 rule, right? So 80% of your revenue is generated by 20% of your customers, right? So it's high volume business. the 20% of your customers, typically because they're high volume, I'll probably say nearly 100% of those would go via the API because they want to automate as much as possible. So naturally, the long tail is interesting because it does, the more resellers you get on the long tail, the bigger difference it's going to make. But the big high volume players will solely go via the API. And they'll use the dashboard for administrative purposes, invoicing, top up, maybe looking at statistics. But they would also expect to get a lot of the statistics via the API as well.
And, speaking of kind of AI and that sort of thing, I think a lot of us are sitting back and saying, how is this going to impact our industry? So I'm curious kind of on a couple fronts. So first of all, have you given thought to kind of how AI will change the demand for domain names?
I think domain searching will become more easier, more sophisticated. Not sure how it's going to change the perspective of the buyer, but definitely things will become more easier. Finding the domain name that you want, that suits your needs, providing alternatives will become more easier. We look at AI more in how can it help in migration services? How could we leverage it in the back end to develop quicker? It's a two-edged sword with AI because some of the code it generates at first glance is really good, but the further you dig into it, you're like, well, it's not actually as good as I anticipated it. So, being respectful towards AI, how we leverage it, absolutely. Is it going to be part of OpusDNS infrastructure? Without a doubt. To what end? We're still exploring, I'll be honest.
Do you think, though, the endpoints where people register domains, I mean, I've heard people looking at Wix and Squarespace and saying, oh, man, all these new tools are coming out and it's going to be so much easier to build, just say, a website, right? A basic website. And this is going to change where people are building online and then how they're getting domains. Do you see that being the case?
I'm not sure. I mean, you look at, there's a lot of movement in the website builder space. When you look at Lovable, for example, that just recently was in the news, very intuitive website builder. Wix, Squarespace, they're all developing quickly in that space. I still think customers will want to separate. Yes, customers will gravitate towards these website builders, get the domain just for the sake of ease. But I think we still need to look at it as two separate pairs of shoes. Where do you register your domains, manage your domains, and what tools do you use to go online with your domains, right? However that is as a website or whatever.
And of course, some of these tools, though, are prime candidates for becoming resellers, right?
Ideally, they choose OpusDNS, yes.
So let me ask you about that. What is your pitch? If someone's like, oh, either let's say I've created a cool tool, a vibe coding tool, I want to start offering domains, or I'm already a reseller with someone else. Why would you say they should pick up the phone and talk to you?
I think when it comes to reselling at scale, there aren't many options. And then, these are all companies that have established themselves and are well respected in the market, but they've been around for years, right? We believe we bring a fresh perspective to the market, along with us attempting to humanize a virtual product. So if you go to our website, you'll see 2 pictures of our staff. We're selling a virtual product. We really want to humanize it. Pick up the phone, talk to us. We're not looking at you just as another customer. We're looking at you as a partner. Let us understand your business. How can we help you? Let us help you succeed, right? And let us take away the heavy lifting of managing domains so you can focus on what matters most to you, sales, growing your business.
Got it. And I know you've had some beta customers on for a while. We're recording this here. You just launched last week. By the time we're recording this, by the time it airs, it'll be about a week and a half. What sort of feedback, early response are you getting?
So our approach to OpusDNS was API first. So the API has to be rock solid. The documentation has to be rock solid. And we want to make sure that we pair this with impeccable support. Think Rackspace.
Early days of Rackspace, not private equity Rackspace, but whatever.
Exactly. So it was fanatical support. And currently, when you look at our space, there is no real leader when it comes to customer service. We want to take that position and hold it. When the mantra or the marching orders was, let's develop an API that is rock solid. The documentation needs to be, it is imperative that it is up to par with the expectations of our clients. All of our dashboard is based on the API naturally. So the API had to be built first before we build the dashboard. That's why we released it earlier, had an early API access, onboarded several customers. The feedback has been good, valuable feedback for us. There have been some tweaks, but the feedback in general has been very, very good, which gives us comfort naturally, right? So feedback's been good. Dashboard is now released. Thankfully, we released last week. So a little bit of a load off our shoulders. Now we just want customers to come to us.
All right. And what's the best way for a customer to reach out? Is it to go to the website? Is it to contact you directly? Is it
either myself, Hakan, Marco, website? We have multiple areas where you can contact us. Don't be shy. Just pick up the phone, drop us an email. We'll follow up.
All right. And that also goes for people interested in working for OpusDNS. So again, that's /careers if you want to learn more about that. So Robbie, really, you've got a really fascinating and long history, as you mentioned, in the domain industry. I join you on that long history and feeling like showing our ages, right? So
you look younger, Andy.
Well, Robbie, thanks so much for coming on the show this week.
Thank you so much for having me. Greatly appreciate it.
My guest this week has been Robbie Birkner. He is the CEO North America for OpusDNS. That's OpusDNS.com. That's a wrap on this week's Domain Name Wire podcast. You can listen to all previous episodes at dnw.com/podcast or on your favorite podcast app. Thanks for listening.